Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I pulled into the Home Depot parking lot feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. 11 hours of standing in the sun directing traffic around construction zones will do that to you. My feet hurt, my back ached, and all I wanted was to grab a new drill and collapse on my couch. The old one finally gave out that morning and I needed a replacement before my next shift. The fluorescent lights inside felt harsh after being outside all day. I made my way to the tool section, my high visibility vest still on because I was too tired to care about changing. The radio on my shoulder clicked occasionally with static from the nearby equipment. I started comparing prices on the drills, trying to figure out which one would last longer than the last piece of junk. That's when I heard someone behind me asking about wax toilet rings. There were other people browsing nearby, so I didn't think much of it. I kept looking at the drill specs, weighing my options. The voice came again, louder this time and clearly annoyed. Someone wanted to know if I planned to do my job or just stand there looking at tools. I looked around expecting to see some poor employee getting chewed out. Happens all the time at this location. But instead, this 30-something guy in a white button-down and tie was staring directly at me like I'd just insulted his mother. I looked down at myself. My vest had my company name on the back, with traffic control printed in huge letters. My certification card hung right there on my chest. The actual employees wore orange aprons. I asked if I could help him with something. He said yes, I could tell him where the damn wax rings were. It clicked then. This guy thought I worked here. I almost laughed. I tried to apologize and explain, but he cut me off before I could finish. He said he didn't want to hear anything except an aisle number. People were starting to stare. His face was getting red, veins popping out on his forehead. He asked how I even got this job being so stupid. I tried again to tell him I didn't work there, but he interrupted me again. He was yelling now, asking why this was so hard and demanding to know where the wax rings were. Something in my exhausted brain decided this was the perfect time to be petty. I pointed at a random aisle behind him, nowhere near the plumbing section. I told him they were right there. He said finally, asking how stupid I could be. Then he stormed off and I went back to my drills. Maybe he'd find an actual employee and leave me alone. I should have known better. He came barreling back about 3 minutes later, his face even redder than before. He started yelling that I didn't even know how to do my job. He said his best friend was the district manager and he'd have my job. He kept going on about how I sent him to the wrong aisle and what kind of idiot does that. He kept getting louder with each word. A small crowd had formed watching this guy lose his mind. I raised my hand and pointed to the same aisle again. I told him they were right there and asked if he could see them. Then I threw his own words back at him, asking how stupid he could be. His eyes went wide. Before I could react, he smacked my hand down hard and shoved me backward. My shoulders hit the shelf behind me, drills rattling. He called me a stupid punk teenager. I'm not a fighter, never have been, but I've been on construction sites long enough to know when someone's all talk and when they're actually a threat. This guy was all talk, and he'd just put his hands on me. I punched him once, square in the nose. The crunch was audible. He fell backward, his head hitting the concrete floor with a sickening thud. Blood started pouring from both nostrils immediately. He started screaming for someone to call the police, saying I just attacked him. It was self-defense, but he'd hit his head hard. Really hard. What if he was seriously hurt? What if I got in trouble because I punched instead of just pushing him away? A manager jogged over asking what was going on. The guy on the ground screamed that an employee had attacked him when he tried to ask for simple directions. He told the manager to look at what I did. Blood was pooling under his head now, mixing with what was still gushing from his nose. The manager looked around at the gathering crowd, then at the actual employees making their way over. He asked who did this. The guy yelled again, asking if everyone was this stupid. He pointed at me with a shaking hand. The manager said I didn't work there. The manager got on his radio, calling for more help and asking me to follow him. We went to the security office while someone else stayed with a bleeding guy. I sat there for what felt like forever. replaying everything in my head, wondering if I'd just ruined my life over a stupid encounter. When the police finally came to me, they said his story didn't match what the witnesses were saying. Then the manager pulled up the camera footage. It showed everything. Him hitting my hand, shoving me into the shelf, me cornered with nowhere to go. One punch. That was it. The officer told me the guy was insisting they arrest me. Then he asked if I wanted to press charges. I thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. This guy had harassed me, assaulted me, and then tried to get me thrown in jail for defending myself. I said yeah, I did want to press charges. They arrested him right there in the store. A few months later, I got a letter saying he'd pleaded guilty to avoid jail time. He's got an assault charge on his record now, all because he couldn't be bothered to read a vest or find an actual employee. I got my drill and went home. Best $99 I ever spent. I pulled into the parking lot just as the sun started to set. My shift didn't start for another 20 minutes, but I liked getting there early. This was only my 3rd week as a contracted security guard, and I wanted to make a good impression. The company had sent me to this location because the previous guard quit without notice. Nobody told me why, but I was about to find out. The job itself was straightforward enough. I sat by the back door of the stockroom and made sure only the renovation contractors got through. The store had recently gone to 24-hour operations, and they were doing major work on the building while trying to stay open. My shift ran from 8 at night until 8 in the morning. 12 hours of sitting in a folding chair, making sure nobody wandered into the construction zone and helped themselves to whatever they wanted. The first couple of weeks went smoothly. Most of the night managers were fine with me being there. They'd stop by occasionally to chat or see if I needed anything. I spent most of my time studying for my provincial security guard exam and eating small snacks to keep my blood sugar stable. I have hypoglycemia, so I kept a little cooler under my chair with fruit, nuts, juice, and water. The condition meant I had to eat regularly or I'd get shaky and dizzy. Then I met her. She came walking over during my 2nd week, all blonde highlights and that haircut. I could tell right away she had a problem with me. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I told her I was doing my job and monitoring the back entrance. She said my job was whatever she told me it was, and she needed me to sweep the stockroom. I explained that I was contracted specifically for door security and couldn't leave my post. She wasn't used to people saying no to her. She told me she didn't care what my contract said, and while I was in her store, I did what she told me. I stayed calm and explained that my supervisor had been very clear about my duties. If I left the door unattended or did work outside my contract, I wouldn't be covered by workers' compensation if something happened. She huffed and walked away, but I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, she called my supervisor the next night. Then my supervisor called hers. Then everything got worse. She started showing up during my break times, claiming I was taking too long, even though I only ever took my allotted 30 minutes. I had to call a mobile guard to cover my post during breaks, and I made sure to log everything down to the minute. She didn't care about facts though, she just wanted to make my life difficult. She'd appear out of nowhere and tell me I was taking advantage of the company, saying all I did was sit around all night doing nothing. I'd remind her that I was doing exactly what I was hired to do. She'd snap back that all I did was read books and stuff my face. She started making comments about my cooler of snacks. One night, she grabbed it and looked through it like she was conducting an inspection. She told me I didn't need all this food and called me a lazy pig making up excuses. I explained that I had a medical condition and needed to keep my blood sugar stable. She said she bet I made that up so I could sit there and eat all night. I started documenting everything. Every interaction, every comment, every time she tried to make me do something outside my duties. I gave copies to my supervisor at the end of each week. The mobile guards who covered my days off started doing the same thing after they met her. The worst part was when she started messing with me at the checkout. I'd grab a few things during my break, and she'd swoop in and order the cashier to close their register right when I got there. It made me almost late getting back to my post more than once. After that, I started buying my snacks before my shift at a different store. She also kept trying to use the back door since she parked behind the building. Every time I stopped her, She'd go off about how I was on a power trip. She told me that a woman had no place doing this kind of work anyway. I said it was a good thing I was qualified then. She fired back that the only reason I took this job was to meet men, sitting there all night hoping some construction worker would pay attention to me. I just stared at her until she left. What else could I do? This went on for 5 weeks. 5 weeks of petty harassment and constant attempts to get me to abandon my post or do work I wasn't hired for. I was reaching my breaking point, but I kept my head down and did my job. Then came the night that changed everything. I was on my break at the restaurant inside the store. I decided to treat myself to some fries after a long week. I was standing at the counter waiting for my order when I heard her voice behind me. She told me I needed to come with her right now. I turned around and saw her standing there with a teenage girl who was crying. The girl looked about 16, tears streaming down her face. I asked what was wrong. She said she'd just caught a shoplifter and needed me to hold her for the police. I felt my stomach drop. This was way outside my duties and she knew it. I told her I couldn't do that and that she needed to get her loss prevention officer to handle it. She smirked at me. She said she'd sent them home because we didn't need them if I was already on site. She asked why they should pay for more security than they needed. My brain just stopped. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was the mobile guard who was supposed to cover my break. He told me he had to cut my break short because he got an alarm call nearby. I told him there was a situation up here that the night manager had sent the loss prevention staff home and was trying to get me to detain someone. There was a long pause, then some very creative swearing. He said he'd call the night supervisor and told me to stay put. I hung up and turned back to find Karen grabbing my tray of food. She walked straight to the trash can and dumped it in. She told me to get myself up to the loss prevention office and start the paperwork. The cashier, who'd been watching the whole thing, flagged me over and handed me a fresh order of fries in a bag. She even added a couple of small cheeseburgers. I told Karen to do it herself because it wasn't my job, then walked away. She followed me, dragging the crying girl with her and yelling about how incompetent I was and how she'd have me fired. But she stopped at the edge of the construction zone. Didn't want to get her fancy shoes dirty. 20 minutes later, my mobile supervisor showed up with another guard. He told me to head to the office behind customer service. My stomach was in knots. I was sure I was getting fired. When I walked in, everyone was there. Karen, the girl, 2 police officers, the general manager for the location, a loss prevention officer, and my boss. Not my supervisor, my actual boss, the owner of the company. It was nearly 4 in the morning. If he'd driven out here personally, something serious was happening. My boss asked me to tell him what happened tonight. Before I could say anything, Karen launched into a rant about how I was lazy and incompetent. She went on about how all I did was eat and sleep on the job and take long phone calls. She even claimed I brought a laptop and played computer games instead of working. I'd never owned a laptop in my life. My boss listened without interrupting. Then he turned to me and said it was my turn. I explained everything. The loss prevention officer confirmed that Karen had canceled their shifts for the rest of the week without authorization. The restaurant cashiers backed up my story about the food. The general manager went from confused to furious when she listened. Then my boss pulled out a stack of papers and handed them to the general manager. Photocopies of every report I'd filed about Karen's harassment. Reports from the other guards too. The general manager read the first 3 pages and looked up. She said she'd heard enough. The police left. Apparently Karen had tried to tell them I was helping the girl steal, trying to get me arrested too. The other guard covered the rest of my shift, and my boss told me to come see him after my days off. I found out later that the girl hadn't stolen anything. Karen thought a bottle of soda she was drinking came from the store cooler, but she'd bought it from the vending machines outside. Karen got fired for breaking company guidelines by canceling the loss prevention shifts without authority, for harassing the contracted guards, and for theft when she threw my food away. I worked at that location for another month. Didn't have a single problem after that. I grew up with my sister being the center of my world. She lost her sight when we were kids, and since then I've made it my mission to make sure she gets to experience everything life has to offer. We've developed this rhythm over the years where I describe things to her, and she trusts me to guide her through new experiences. One of our favorite things to do together is visit amusement parks. The thrill of the rides, the sounds, the energy of the crowds, she loves all of it. Our country has accessibility accommodations for people with disabilities, which means my sister can use a shorter line at attractions. It's not about cutting ahead or getting special treatment, it's about making sure she doesn't have to navigate packed, chaotic queues where she can't see what's happening around her. The crowds can be disorienting and sometimes scary for her, so this system helps make the experience manageable. We've been planning this trip for weeks. My sister had been counting down the days, practically bouncing with excitement every time she talked about the new roller coaster the park had just opened. I'd read her all the reviews, described what it looked like from the photos online, and she'd memorized every detail I'd given her. When we finally got there that morning, the park was packed. Summer vacation meant families everywhere, kids running around with cotton candy, the smell of popcorn and hot dogs filling the air. I guided my sister through the entrance, her hand resting on my elbow, like always, and we made our way to the roller coaster she'd been dreaming about. The accessibility line was short, just like it was supposed to be. When we moved toward the front, I noticed a woman in the regular line staring at us. She had that look, you know the one. Short haircut, arms crossed, lips pursed in disapproval. I tried to ignore her, hoping she'd mind her own business. No such luck. She walked right over to us. She demanded to know why we got to skip the line. I opened my mouth to explain, but she didn't give me a chance. She went on about how unfair it was, how they'd been waiting for an hour, and we just waltzed right to the front. I kept my voice steady, trying to be patient. I explained that my sister was blind and that the park had policies in place to help guests with disabilities. My sister's grip on my arm tightened. She could hear the anger in this woman's voice, and I felt her starting to pull back slightly. The woman scoffed and said being blind was no excuse. She accused us of using that to cheat the system. The words hit me like a slap. I felt my sister flinch beside me. People around us were starting to stare, and I could feel my face getting hot with embarrassment and anger. Before I could respond, this woman did something I never could have anticipated. She reached out, grabbed my sister's glasses right off her face, and threw them on the ground. The frames clattered against the pavement. She said something cruel about how maybe this would give my sister her sight back. Then she actually hit my sister on the head. It wasn't hard enough to really hurt her, but the gesture was so cruel, so mocking, that I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My sister let out a small gasp and started trembling. Tears were forming in her eyes. She wasn't crying from pain, she was crying from the humiliation of being attacked by a complete stranger for no reason. I was frozen, my mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. Part of me wanted to scream at this woman, part of me wanted to grab my sister and run, and part of me couldn't believe someone would actually do something so horrible. Then everything happened at once. A soda bottle came flying through the air and smashed directly into the side of the woman's head. Glass shattered everywhere. Soda exploded across her face and clothes. She stumbled sideways, her hand going to her head. The crowd around us erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. The woman pulled her hand away and stared at it. Blood was mixed with the soda running down her fingers. She spun around, screaming at whoever had thrown the bottle. She called the person a crazy witch. That's when I saw her, a middle-aged woman standing back in the regular line, arms at her sides, with the slightest smile on her face. She didn't look sorry at all. Within seconds, security guards were rushing over, then park medical staff, then actual police officers. It was chaos. The woman who'd attacked us was screaming about being assaulted, demanding the other woman be arrested. Paramedics were trying to examine her head wound while she kept pointing and yelling. The police started separating everyone and taking statements. People from the crowd stepped forward immediately, all of them eager to tell what they'd seen. They described how this woman had verbally attacked us, thrown my sister's glasses, hit her on the head. The security team pulled up camera footage right there on their tablets, and you could see everything, the whole incident from multiple angles. The woman kept trying to play victim, crying about being attacked unprovoked, but the evidence was overwhelming. The cameras showed her approaching us, her throwing the glasses, her hitting my sister. The bottle throw came after all of that. In the end, the police arrested her for assault. They put her in handcuffs while she was still arguing, still insisting she was the one who'd been wronged. The woman who'd defended us got questioned, but the officers seemed to understand she'd been protecting my sister. They took her information and let her go. The park staff couldn't apologize enough. They gave us passes to come back anytime, offered to have medical check my sister over to make sure she was okay. The manager personally came to talk to us, telling us this kind of thing never happens and they'd be reviewing their security procedures. My sister was shaken but physically fine. I picked up her glasses, miraculously they weren't broken, and cleaned them off before putting them back on her face. When everything finally settled down, and the police had taken the woman away in their car, I looked around for the lady who'd thrown the bottle. I wanted to thank her, to tell her how much it meant that she'd stood up for us, but she was gone. I searched the crowd, asked the security guards if they knew where she went, but nobody had seen her leave. We never got her name. We don't know anything about her except that in that moment, when my sister needed someone, she was there. My sister and I still go to amusement parks. We rode that roller coaster later that same day, actually. We weren't going to let one horrible person ruin something we both loved. And somewhere out there is a stranger who defended us when we needed it most. We'll never forget her. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.